She was doing everything right. A young woman, a growing career, a quiet afternoon in a safe neighborhood. The kind of moment that feels ordinary, predictable. The hours move slowly, each minute blending into the next. Forgettable, at least that's how it felt to everyone passing by, unaware of what was about to unfold. But what no one knew was that, within minutes, this open house, meant to welcome, connect, and celebrate, would become a crime scene. There was no forced entry. The front door showed no signs of tampering. Everything seemed undisturbed. No robbery occurred. Nothing appeared to be missing from the scene. No warning signs foreshadowed what was to come. Just the subtle hum of a normal day. Just 2 gunshots in the middle of the day. Inside a home meant to welcome strangers. And then, nothing. No suspect, no answers, no justice for nearly 15 years. Then in 2026, everything changed. A name emerged, Kristen Ramsey, and a mystery that haunted an entire community, raising questions, fueling fear, and uniting neighbors in hope, began to unravel. But even now, the most important question still remains. Why? Because this was never random. This was something else, something planned, something personal, something hidden in plain sight for over a decade. This is Murder Vault Chronicles. This is the story of Kristen Ramsey. Let's go back to April 8, 2011. A quiet suburban street in West Des Moines, Iowa. Freshly built townhomes lined the road, clean sidewalks stretched in every direction, and on that particular afternoon, doors were open, welcoming strangers inside. Inside one of those homes, a 27-year-old real estate agent named Ashley Oakland was working an open house. It was routine, simple, something she had done many times before. She was building her career, meeting potential buyers, and doing everything right to move forward in her profession. Ashley was known for being warm, approachable, and driven. She was close to her family and focused on her future. Just one day earlier, she had spent hours with her brother, helping him learn the basics of her growing real estate business. There had been no fear, no indication that anything was wrong, nothing to suggest that her life was about to be cut short. But that afternoon, something changed. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence that anyone had broken in, which meant whoever entered that home had likely been let in. At some point before 2 p.m., a nearby employee heard something, not loud enough to immediately cause panic, but enough to feel off, enough to make them stop, listen, and then decide to check inside the model home. What they found was something no one was ever prepared for. Ashley Oakland was lying on the floor. She had been shot, twice. Emergency responders arrived quickly. She was still alive, but barely. Every second mattered. She was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save her life. But it wasn't enough. Ashley died later that day, inside a home that was supposed to feel safe. The shock spread quickly. A young woman had been murdered while doing her job, in the middle of the day, in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It did not make sense. And for investigators, the lack of answers was immediate. There was no sign of robbery. Nothing appeared to have been taken. There was no clear struggle beyond the shooting itself, no obvious motive, and no immediate suspect. What investigators did know was unsettling. Ashley had likely opened the door for her killer. That detail changed everything, because it suggested this was not random. It suggested an intention. Police began their investigation. They canvassed the neighborhood, interviewed witnesses, and collected every piece of evidence they could find. Leads began to come in, then more leads, then hundreds more. Over time, those leads turned into thousands. People were questioned, tips were followed, suspects were considered, but nothing held. No one was arrested, and slowly the case began to fade from the headlines. But the story, the pain, and the questions never truly went away. They echoed through the years. Ashley's family refused to let that happen. They spoke out. They pushed for answers. They kept her name alive. Even as the years passed, they continued to believe that someone knew something, that the truth was still out there. A reward was offered. Investigators revisited the case again and again. New technology emerged. New strategies were applied. But still, there was no breakthrough. 1 year turned into 5. 5 turned into 10, and then nearly 15 years passed. 15 years of waiting, every sunrise and sunset filled with uncertainty. 15 years of questions. 15 years without justice. Then in March of 2026, everything changed. Without warning, police announced an arrest. A grand jury had issued an indictment. A suspect had been identified. A name was finally connected to the murder of Ashley Oakland. Kristen Elizabeth Ramsey, a 53-year-old title officer from Woodward, Iowa. She had been charged with first-degree murder. After nearly a decade and a half, the case that once seemed impossible to solve had taken a dramatic turn. But the announcement raised as many questions as it answered. Because for most people, the name meant nothing. Kristen Ramsey had not been a public suspect. She had not been widely discussed in connection with the case. There had been no clear focus on her in the years prior. And yet behind the scenes, investigators had clearly been building something, piece by piece, quietly, until they were ready to act. Kristen Ramsey had been taken into custody on a $2 million cash-only bond. But even with the arrest, one critical piece was still missing. The motive. Why Ashley? Why that day? Why that home? As of this filming, the full truth was still being withheld, and Kristen Ramsey had not yet entered a plea. Authorities have not revealed what had led them to Kristen. They have not explained the evidence that connected her to the crime, and they have not shared what they believed actually happened inside that townhome. And that silence left a void. Because while there was a name, there was still no clear story for the family and the community that had waited for answers. A possible connection had surfaced. Reports indicated that Kristen Ramsey had ties to the development where Ashley was working. She was believed to have worked for the company connected to the townhome community where the murder had taken place. She was also linked to a title and escrow company in the real estate industry. It was a detail that raised questions. Because if there had been a connection between Ramsey and the environment Ashley was working in, then this may not have been random at all. It may have been planned, it may have been targeted, or it may have been something far more complicated than anyone had initially realized. But without a confirmed motive, those questions remained unanswered. For Ashley's family, the arrest has been a moment they had waited for. For years, it represented progress. It represented movement. It represented the possibility that, after all that time, the truth might finally come to light. It could not erase their loss. It did not undo what had happened to Ashley. What it did was open a new chapter, one that would likely unfold in a courtroom, where evidence would be presented, where timelines would be examined, where the full story might finally be told. Until then, the case remained suspended between past and present, with the community still searching for closure and truth. A crime that had happened in seconds but had taken nearly 15 years to catch an alleged killer. A young woman doing her job, welcoming people looking for a home. Now, after all that time, there was finally a name. But the most important question still remained. Not just who did it, but why. This has been Murder Vault Chronicles. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel.